Hi, everyone. Tara at Kittens, Weights, and Tarot is just wrapping up. Hello, Paperback Palacios. I think I saw you at Tara's. I was in and out. I was getting ready. Hi, Wasima. I'll just wait a few minutes for people to come over. Yeah, this is fun. Her talk was so interesting. Hi, Sadhana. Yeah, so if you don't know, my first college degree was in classics, so listening to all the mythology is pretty awesome. Brings back a lot of memories for me. Okay, we'll just wait a few minutes. Looks like people are coming in. I can see the numbers. Hello, Sherry Bug. Just waiting for everyone to pop on over before we dive into the intense topic of the shadow side of love. I love exploring the shadow and the hidden side of things, the darker side's not dark as in like evil, but you know, what's not on the surface. So I love all that stuff, but it can be intense, definitely. Hi, Lady Knight. Hi, everyone. Hi, Fly Butterfly 15. Can you all hear me okay? Is the sound and picture good? Sometimes in the mornings, internet is a bit weird here. And it's very bright. I have the blinds closed, but the sun is like right there. So hopefully I don't come across too bright to you guys. Good. Awesome. I will switch over to StreamYard. I just haven't had a chance to pop over and figure it out because that seems to be what everyone's using. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll get started. So I just want to refer back to Wasima's video. So hers was 2 hours ago. And she mentioned something about accepting love and accepting miracles. And I just want to affirm that there's a challenge, and I think some of this comes from shadow aspects within ourselves. There's a challenge when it comes to accepting love and accepting miracles in our lives. But I often go back to the meanings of the words, like what is a miracle? Because this topic is love, a miracle. What is a miracle? And long ago, I did a blog post on it. I have a blog that's on A Course in Miracles, obviously. And I did a blog post on miracles. And the word miracle comes from the Latin word miror. I mean, that's where we get it, like mirror as well. And mirror, it's a reflexive verb, and it means to look at, to admire, to be like, oh, wow, that is so great. So that's what a miracle is. It's something we look at, it's something we admire. And if we think of love as a miracle, it's something to be admired. And I think part of the challenge of accepting love, or even just miracles in our lives, of being open to receive, which I think is a key thing. A lot of people get hurt by love and then they shield it off energetically. And then it makes it hard to receive it, even if we want it so much. A big challenge is just allowing ourselves to say, it's okay to have love in my life. It's okay for there to be good things. It's okay to let someone help me. It's okay to let someone be there for me instead of resisting it because of pain or old wounds. And often that's connected to shadows we have within us, no matter how much we want it, no matter how much we admire the miracle of love. And a lot of it begins with self-love, of course. If we don't love ourselves, we may not believe or accept that someone else can love us. Thank you, Wasima. So the shadow side comes when a lot in play when we ask, why do we resist receiving love? Why do we resist allowing love into our lives? So I have my notebook here, my notes on the topic that I went into, because the title is Understanding the Shadow Side of Love to Bring in Deeper Love and More Loving Relationships into Our Lives. But it starts with us. We have to connect. And I think in Tara's last live, they talked about something I heard while I was getting dressed, the law of attraction. And it's like, yeah, if we are really open to receive love, love will be attracted to us. But if our shadows about love or the dynamics of relationships, because a lot of this is about relationship dynamics, both our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others, whether it's a love partner, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, a friend, work relationships, family relationships, especially. If we don't understand that, we can't have that miracle of the loving relationship. Doesn't mean it's perfect all the time. So let's look at some of these shadows. We have to define love too. So we know what a miracle is. For our definition, simplified for this live, is a miracle, something to be admired, right? And often things we admire, we want in our lives, no matter how much psychological, subconscious shadow resistance there is. But what is love? And a lot of people will say, love is giving to someone else, love is sacrifice to someone else, but that's an imbalance. Love is all encompassing. And to me, love is unconditional. If it's conditional, it's not love. So love is very open. It doesn't mean you put yourself in a relationship or a position to be used and abused, because then you're not loving yourself and you're actually not loving the other person, because you're enabling them in that behavior. This is getting deep already. I'm trying not to get too deep, too psychological here. But love is an act. Love is a verb. And it's actually quoting my brother. He said this long ago. He's like, love isn't a noun, love is a verb. Love isn't something you hold. It's not an object. It's not something you possess. That's kind of where lust comes in, and we'll get to that. Love is a verb, which means it's an action. It's something you do. It's taking yourself and other into consideration and looking at how you can help them, how you can be there for them. Sometimes being there for someone is to not be around, right? So it gets really detailed depending on the relationship. But think of love as an act. You can think of it as an act of kindness, an act of compassion, an act of giving without sacrificing and not loving yourself, right? Because then, again, we get into unhealthy dynamics. Oh, hi, Parag. Nice to see you here. Okay, so my next question I wrote down is, what are the shadow sides of love? So I'm using my deck, which has turned out, I've said this in a few videos, it wasn't my intention to create a shadow work deck, but it's turned out to be a shadow work deck. I mean, I guess that's what I was creating. I just didn't have it in my mind, at least like over 10 years ago when I came up with this, is the Fine Lines 44 Meditations for Intentional Living. The live video is like flipped for me. So if I'm like moving weird, it's because it's like flipped around and I'm not used to that. And I actually made a giant workbook called Traversing the Fine Lines. I think it's not backwards for you guys, but I'll just say what everything is. And this is the workbook. It's a huge thing. It has prompts and then 10 journal pages for all the fine lines. So we're going to go through some of these fine lines because you can kind of see them as the light side and the shadow side. Though they are both two sides of the coin, you can't have one without the other. So it's not like you can ignore the shadow. You can't suppress it. You can't ignore those things. You can't push them away because it will explode out of you at some point, usually like when you're upset or in an argument or just at the wrong moment in time in life. But we need both to see the contrast, to see the difference, so that we can make decisions. We can be discerning, which is one I'll get to, between those two fine lines, if that makes sense. Oh, so it's not backwards for you, right? So it's backwards only for me. Okay. So the first one I have here is give and receive. Oh, blue cards are going to make me turn red because of the lighting. But let's see if I block myself. There we go. Give and receive versus give and take. And I wrote down in my notes, like, the shadow side often, especially when we look at love and relationship dynamics, and that's really key here, relationship dynamics, there's often a hidden agenda. And if there's a hidden agenda, if that's the driving force, I mean, I think we all psychologically, have personal agendas and things. Not that that means we're bad, but it's just kind of the normal way the mind works. But if that's the driving force, if that's like the conscious focus is the hidden agenda, then we're controlled by the shadow in our relationships. So give and receive versus give and take. Now, we often hear people say, oh, love is give and take. Relationships are give and take. But to me, if you take, you're not open to receive the love that is there. You're not open to receive the miracle of love or other things in our lives, but often it has to do with love and people caring for us and nurturing us and being kind to us. And I experienced this after a series of relationships with very narcissistic people. When I was finally in a relationship, or even just with friends wanted to like take me out to dinner or buy me something. It was so hard for me to accept. I'd say thank you, but it was uncomfortable because I was not used to receiving. And I realized, though it's nice to receive things, right? I had blocked it and I had to work on that a lot. So opening ourselves to receive as much as we give versus giving and either blocking it or taking what we want. And often when we all probably have done this at some point in our lives, want something from someone, we can act a little bit manipulative. We have a hidden agenda. And when we're doing that, our love is conditional to that other person, whether it's a friend, a relationship, or at work. Our love becomes conditional, and then to me, it's not love. If it's conditional, it's not love. So we often have to check ourselves. This is about checking ourselves. Am I being truly loving? If I want something from someone, am I comfortable enough in myself to ask, hey, can you help me out with this? It doesn't have to be a physical object. Asking someone, I really need help with this. Can you help me? And being open to receive that rather than finding a way to take it. And a big part of this, the giving part, because give is part of those two dynamics, the two side coins, is am I over giving in order to get something back, whether that's conscious or subconscious. So if it's subconscious, the act of self-inquiry is going to help you figure this out. Like, this can go really deep. You can spend months like journaling just on this. Am I over giving? Am I helping them? We'll talk about, love relationship dynamics because, we just had Valentine's Day. Am I giving so much to this person, doing everything they need and everything they ask and everything I think they need, and give as an act of control? Because if you go to an extreme of something, it sort of loops back into the opposite, if that makes sense. It loops back. And so you're thinking, I'm giving. And this is where, self-sacrifice comes in. I'm sacrificing this, and so they owe me that, or I'm going to give so much that they feel guilty and need to give to me. So that's a shadow aspect to really think about. I think it's really common, especially because at least, on the West Coast of America, growing up, I heard this a lot. Love is give and take, give and take. And so it's in our psyches, whether we're thinking about it or not, that there's this take aspect of love and relationships, when really it's about give and being open to receive. And that all, comes down to boundaries as well. Okay, let me check the chat. Okay, all right, so the next one I have, the next fine line is in love versus in lust. And so I briefly mentioned that as we started. When we're in love, what does it mean? So it's really defining these terms. What does it mean to be in love? That infatuation phase, the puppy love, the excitement, that's the initial falling in love with someone. But when we're in love with someone, when it's sustained, and relationships go up and down, whether it's a friendship or a love partner or whatever, but when it's generally sustained, when we're in love with someone, we occasionally stop and ask, am I being unconditional loving? Am I giving in a healthy way to the other? Am I receptive to their love? Is it a mutually in love type of relationship? And that can be with friends too. It doesn't have to, love doesn't necessarily mean romantic love, but am I being compassionate and loving and kind? Versus in lust. So lust, it's sensual, it's desirous, and that can be part of an intimate romantic relationship. But lust has this this energy of wanting to possess, wanting to have that person in our possession, near us, around us. There's an element of that grasping, like in Buddhism, grasping for someone or something. You can be in lust for an object, like, oh, I really want that and I want it more and more, and I'm going to grasp for it. And then you get the object and you're like, whatever. You didn't really love it. You had lust for it. You wanted to possess it and own it. So that's another shadow side to, for self-inquiry, to go deep within. Like, do I love this person? Or am I acting out of love for this person? Or am I acting, again, it comes down to the shadow side, a little hidden agenda, because the shadow is very much, the individual ego working on its own, not in balance with self-inquiry. Am I just lusting to be with them because I want them around, because I can take, it gives me something I want and need that I'm not acknowledging to myself and the other, so that we can do it in a healthy way? Am I grasping for it? It's actually making me think of like buying too many tarot decks. Am I lusting for that deck because everyone else has it and someone else has it and I get it, and it's like, I don't like it, right? So this can play out with the things we own as well. Are we in love with it? Or are we in lust? Do we want to just possess it? Is it something we want to take? Or is it something we really wish to receive? Okay, so that leads to the next fine line I pulled out. So I pulled out, I think, 6 here out of 44. Supporting versus controlling. So something to ask in my relationships. Am I being supporting? And especially when it comes to self-love and, our relationship with ourselves. Am I being supportive? Or am I trying to control so that I or someone else does what I think they should be doing? So an example of this I can think of is, I had a friend who was a rower. She did crew, so rowing on a boat. And her family, they'd say, we support you. Yet they would do things that would try to sabotage her success. So they, hidden agendas of the shadow, right? Trying to control, trying to sabotage. They would do things, yet they would say, no, this is supporting you. This is for your own good, when it really wasn't what she needed to do to get stronger, to perform at her best, to get the rest she needed. They continually did things that were disruptive to her goals. They weren't being supportive, even though in their minds, the shadow aspect was, oh, but I think you need to do this and I want you to do this. So they were trying to control the situation without stepping back and realizing, she just needs me to support and just be there for her and let her ask if she needs something of me. So that's an example I can think of that. So it's a good thing for all of us to ask in our relationships. Am I supporting this person? Even if I don't like what they personally like what they're doing, or I don't agree with what they're doing. Am I being supportive, or am I doing something or saying something? Often it's, just with a little verbal jab that cuts them down, or sabotages whatever it is they're doing that especially I may not like or agree with. And so we need to ask ourselves those questions in our relationships, because not everyone we're in a relationship with is going to be doing things we agree with, doing things we like, doing things we understand. That is life. That's relationships. And so do we support them without trying to control or sabotage them? Especially covering up the control with, oh, it's for your own good. Because that's an opinion. That's a different opinion. And if, they're doing something that's not good for them, they'll figure it out and then be there for them. If they're doing something that's fine for them, we just don't like it, support them. It's what they love to do. Let me check in with the comments here. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Tara. Yeah, Sherry Book says, I don't have a mother-in-law, but it sounds like the stereotypical. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, like, let's say the mother of the husband, it usually seems to be this dynamic, trying to control the daughter-in-law, saying, oh no, this is good for you and your marriage, or my son likes this. And yeah, the snoopy controlling mother-in-law, saying she's being supportive, but at the same time not. That's kind of a perfect little like stereotypical example. Hi, is it Kyle Liz? Kylie Liz? Hi, welcome. Okay, so the next one I have here, and I wrote a little note like, what is your motivation in the relationship? So that's always a good question to ask. What is my motivation in the relationship or in this dynamic that we're experiencing in this relationship? I pulled out, of course, love versus fear. So that goes back to our question, what is love? And my definition is love is unconditional kindness, unconditional support, unconditional compassion. You still care about the person no matter what. You still hope the best for them no matter what. And fear, in this sense, is the opposite. Are your actions, is your act of love, or what you say is love, really driven by your fear of losing the person? That's a big one in relationships. That creates unhealthy relationship dynamics. That creates those hidden agendas to, cling and hold on to take something from the person. Usually it's attention, it's intangible, to get from the other person, rather than letting go. There's an element of here needing to let your heart be vulnerable, and this action, opening the heart. Again, not where you put yourself in a position where you're used and abused. You must have boundaries still, but opening your heart, allowing it to be vulnerable to, that potential that the person might break up with you, or that your friend may move halfway around the world and you don't get to see them again. Opening your heart and facing that element of fear. Again, it's not, your life is threatened fear that you get away, but the fear of losing the person, or whatever it is you fear of being alone. A lot of people hang into relationships, unhealthy ones, or ones just, it's just not right for them. It doesn't have to be a really bad relationship. Or they hang on to friends that are not, the wrong crowd, so to speak, because there's a fear of being alone. So a good question to ask is, why am I in this relationship? Is there a fear that I must address so that I can be more receptive to receive love and more vulnerable to love another, as well as letting someone love me? Now, those fears may always be there underlying, but being aware of them helps us to not let that fear control ourselves and to control our relationships. Okay. Hi, Christine and Celeste. So love versus fear is a big one. And actually, I've kind of realized all these fine lines are really about what is love? What is love? How can we act out of love as best we can in our day-to-day lives? Now, the next one, kind of connected to love versus fear, is heart-centered versus mind-centered. Lighting's a little bit off there. So heart-centered, right? So the heart chakra, the center of love, acting from our hearts. It's like just another way of saying love versus fear. Are we acting in our relationships, and you can say how you relate to other people in general, from the heart as best we can? We're not perfect every day. We have bad days. We're grumpy. But are we looking and acting towards others in our lives, the people all around us, from a heart-centered perspective? Or is it all a mind-centered perspective? Does it all come from up here? And that's the fear in the love versus fear. It's not a fear of, the lion's chasing after you and you must run for your life fear. It's the fear, the anxiety, the worry that we create in our minds, that fear of being alone, that fear of the person going away, that fear of, whatever it might be. That's mind-centered. Is your relationship, does it come from a mind-centered perspective? And if so, How can you bring some of that energy back down to come from a heart-centered perspective? And when that happens, the energy, it opens up that pathway in the throat chakra, in between the two. It opens that up. And then we're able to communicate both to ourselves about our own, whatever shadows we discover within ourselves, about our own view towards ourselves and how we love ourselves, how we accept ourselves, our sense of self-worth. And then we're able to communicate that, or just communicate in general, more honestly, more openly, more vulnerably to the people in our lives, to who we relate to. So good questions to work with, things to meditate on and look at. And the last of the fine lines, and then we'll look at some archetypes, both in tarot and in the archetypes deck, is discernment versus judgment. And a lot of this energy, discerning versus judging. So judging is usually a quick thought like, oh, so-and-so's being a jerk and blah, blah, blah. Discernment is looking at the situation, observing, looking from different perspectives or the two sides. Let's say there's an argument, and in arguments, we're all heated, it's very mind-centered, and we're quick to judge. When you get out, let's say the argument, we'll use that as our example, get some perspective, discern the situation, observe yourself. What were you feeling? What were you thinking? How did you feel? What did the other person think and feel, to the best of your knowledge? Talk to someone else and get a different perspective. Discern the situation. So when we discern situations that happen in our relationships and our relationship dynamics, we bring our focus back to our heart, right? We become more heart-centered. We find compassion for ourselves because, I always say relationships go two ways. Two people are involved. It's not just one person. It's the dynamics. So discernment gets us back into the heart center to look at the situation and look at ourselves, and then look at the other person with better understanding, with more clarity. And then we can look at whatever judgment we made and look at that and go deeper and say, okay, why do I have that judgment? Is it something my mother would have said? Is it something I've just a prejudice I've held on to about that type of behavior? Or when someone says that one thing, it's coming from different people. I need to discern the specific situation rather than just pass a quick judgment and stick to that judgment. Okay, so those are the fine lines that I pulled out to look at shadow sides of love. And really, of course, it all comes down to, you could just say it all comes down to this card, love versus fear, or heart-centered versus mind-centered. They all break down to that. And we have to, at times, often not when we're in a difficult situation in the relationship, but when, we step away, to do some self-reflection, to look back on ourselves, because it's easy to look at the other person like, oh, they were acting like this, they were projecting that, and blah, blah, blah. That's great. That's the other person. But remember, relationships go two ways. There's two people involved. What was going on within us? What shadows were coming up? What old hurts were coming up and making us pass a quick judgment? We have to look at ourselves. We have to look at those shadows that pop up. So the shadow, like those strong, intense, usually angry reactions, are often those shadows. And they're often, especially in relationships, connected to wounds from past relationships, wounds from childhood. And there can also be a mix of wounds from past lives, but that's a whole different process of looking into. Okay, let me just look at the clock. We're doing good. Okay, so those are the fine lines in relationship dynamics to look at shadows. So now let's look at some tarot cards and some archetype cards. I have them right here for looking at shadow aspects. So let's say you're doing a reading. It doesn't even have to be in a reading. You can just look at these as archetypes. Let's start with the Two of Cups. So this is the Druid Craft Tarot. I don't have the box anymore, so I can't hold it up. We got some sun going here. The Two of Cups. In the Thoth system, it's called the card of love. It's about an interchange, often in especially RWS or Rider-Waite-Smith decks, they'll be exchanging cups. And that's often a wedding ritual, at least in, I don't know, America, where, they intertwine. I can't do it with my own arms, right? And they drink out of the cups with their arms intertwined. It's a give and receive type of relationship. So we can ask, what is an archetype? An archetype is like a recurrent theme or a universal or collective theme or idea that presents across cultures. So this is like the archetype of, I'll say a modern archetype of what we admire, the miracle of love, of what we all seek in relationship. Balanced harmony, mutual respect, mutual support, giving and receiving from both parties. And I think because we have this ideal, and I would, admire this, strive for this, because we have that ideal. I think when challenges come up in relationships, those shadows popping up and the relationship dynamics not being perfect, not being mutually supportive, not being, perfectly, each party giving and receiving, and instead there's like taking dynamics going on, we think the relationship should go away. But that's where the relationship grows, is when the two work together into giving and receiving, working together equally or as equal as possible in understanding those more difficult and challenging parts of the relationship dynamics and the shadows within. And that's how this actually becomes the idealized or admired or the miracle of love that many of us, if not all of us, seek in some way in our lives, whether it is a partner or in, that great best friend. So that I call the archetype of ideal love, the ideal love relationship. And then, of course, we have the lovers. Now, the lovers card, it's ruled by the sign of Gemini. It is very much about choice. But in many modern decks, you see this very sensual, intimate, act of love going on. And so it does have that archetypal energy of sensual love, of physical intimacy, erotic love. So Eros, Cupid. So go watch Taurus if you didn't see it. It was the hour before this. And I'll put the schedule, I'll pin it at the top of the comments for those who haven't been following along after when we're done. So this is another archetype of sensual, sexual love. And that's definitely, in a love relationship, the sexual relationship is an important part. But often this gets confused with the ideal love relationship, the partnership, or I'll block my face here. It gets confused with the partnership. That if this is great, this is automatically great. That if there's a great sex life, everything else will be perfect and fall into place. But that's not true, because it's ignoring all those relationship dynamics that happen in everyday life. So then this can become a shadow archetype within a relationship. I hope that's making sense. That becomes what the relationship is about. And we'll say this goes reversed. All these things kind of go haywire. There's frustration. It's like having the argument and then makeup sex. But the relationship dynamics are still out of balance. The relationship, it's an unhealthy exchange. So looking at that shadow of, we'll say lust, right? This is in love versus in lust. Is being in lust taking over the relationship, and the actual love, the mutual self-respect, respecting the other, kindness for others, supporting the other, again, give and receive, it goes both ways. Is that getting lost because the shadow of lust is overtaking it. I hope that makes sense. So I don't know if it's Kyle Liz or Kylie Liz says, I agree. Working on shadows together is a chance to do. Yeah. I mean, I think that's maybe what a lot of people might do when they go to, counseling. But, hopefully, if you have those challenges in a relationship, your partner is willing to work on that with you. But at least we can work on those within ourselves. And then often when we do inner work, deep inner work ourselves, and it keeps going. We're in this physical world, doesn't just you do it and done, it's gone forever. Our partner or our friend or our coworker will reflect that energy. Or you could say a little bit of the law of attraction. Like we work on a shadow within ourselves. We work on becoming more heart-centered than mind-centered. And by us being and living that example, people or the person around us starts doing that too. So there's an indirect effect. There's a reverberation effect when we do our own inner work. Okay. So the next tarot card I pulled out was, well, it's the Empress, but in this deck, Druidcraft, it's called the Lady. Now, this has a strong mother archetype, of course. She is pregnant in this deck. It's the mother energy. Now, mother energy is nurturing, it's caring, it's giving. The good mom, the perfect mom takes care of her children and feeds them, and they come first. And this kind of gets a little into the giving, right? The give and receive and give and take, but the over giving energy. And the mother archetype, the shadow side is like the smothering mother, the overbearing mother, the over controlling mother, right? And we'll go back to control, supporting versus controlling. That over giving to control, with the mother archetype, you could say the child, but to control the other person's life. I will make your breakfast for you, I'll cook dinner, and I'll clean the house, and I'll do all the laundry. You just, go to work and do what you need to do. And this does often play out with the woman or the more feminine one in the relationship being the overgiving. But one, that drains the overgiver. That can lead to overgiving to control the other or to control the relationship dynamics. And then the other person, like depending on who it is, then they could respond. Or if the relationship dynamics, often this can play out where one person in the relationship is really like the mommy and the other one is like a child. And because they have those two unhealthy archetypes, the overbearing, the shadow mother archetype, and then I guess you call it the shadow, the over needy child archetype, it seems to work, but the dynamics are all connected through the shadow. And so it either becomes this ongoing unhealthy dynamic or it falls apart because the one with the child archetype, you could say that child archetype grows up, right? Wants more independence. And the smothering mother, the shadow archetype of the mother, tries to control it. And so it falls apart. Or, all sorts of things can happen. But I think this is an important archetype to look at in relationships, any type of relationship. Are you and your best friend, does one of you always plan the get-togethers? One of you is always the one to plan the coffee dates, or hey, let's do this. You're the one always reaching out and always giving, oh, hey, I'll help you move. And they just sit back and take, right? Give and take versus give and receive. I think that's an important archetype to look at, that mother archetype energy. Are you being nurturing with healthy boundaries? Are you being a mother to yourself? If you, like, I call myself a mommy person, and that's the mother archetype. If you feel that archetype within you, are you also nurturing yourself? So don't forget that you yourself are someone to love. And I just want to give a story, like years ago, like 2006, 7, when I was like intensely studying yoga. And I say it that way because I was really studying it, but going to a lot of yoga classes. And a lot of the instructors would talk about, yoga is about yoking yourself with the divine, and yoking with God, with the divine, with the universe. with other people, that interconnectedness, we'd send out energy out to everyone in the world. And then I realized one day, I was like, you know what? It's not like it's me here and everyone else out there. This physical body, this physical identity, this ego individual is someone who also needs that love sent to, is someone who also needs to be yoked with. So that's how I think of it. It's like, don't forget. So don't forget yourself as someone to love, as a relationship that you are in. Okay, let me just check on the chat here. Oh, time is flying. Okay. Fly Butterfly says, love is the ability and willingness to allow those you care for to be what they choose for themselves without any insistence that they satisfy you. Oh, Wayne Dyer. Yeah, that is awesome